The hearing of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee will come to order. And before we begin, I want to mention that we have votes on the Senate floor that begin at 11:30. And that means that we will probably take a pause from time to time to go out and vote. We have 3 votes in a row. Votes are usually held every 15 or 20 minutes. So my apology to those of you who are about to testify, and also to those in the audience. Help you understand that because of the voting schedule today, we will be having to take 2 or 3 pauses or recesses during these hearings. We'll come back and finish the process. Today, the committee is going to hold a nomination hearing for 3 very important issues in a very important part of the world. First, we're going to hear from Ambassador Richard Norland to be ambassador to Libya. Ambassador Norland is the foreign policy advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He previously served as ambassador to Georgia and Uzbekistan and as the deputy chief of mission in Afghanistan and Latvia. Among many other diplomatic posts in his lengthy and distinguished career in the Foreign Service, Ambassador Norland was recognized for his service in 2010, receiving the Presidential Distinguished Service Award. Secondly, we'll hear from Ambassador Jonathan Cohen to be ambassador to Egypt. Ambassador Cohen was the deputy ambassador to the United Nations, and following the resignation of Ambassador Haley, he became the acting ambassador to the UN. He served in a number of roles as a career diplomat, including as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, Iraq, and Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy in Nicosia, Cyprus, in addition to posts in other missions around the world. Our third nominee is Mr. John Roccolta, Jr., to be ambassador to the United Arab Emirates. John Roccolta, Jr. is the chairman and CEO of Wallbridge, a global construction firm based in Detroit, Michigan. Wallbridge serves clients in a wide variety of industries, from automotive, aviation, and manufacturing to government, power, and energy markets. He was also the co-chair of the Coalition for the Future of Detroit School Children and the chairman of New Detroit, an organization focused on racial equality and the economic revitalization of the city. We're privileged to be joined by our distinguished colleague, Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, who will be introducing Mr. Roccolta. Therefore, I'm going to postpone my opening statement, and I ask the ranking member to do the same after the nominee introduction. I want to thank all of the individuals for their presence here today, but we're going to begin by recognizing Senator Rubio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for convening this hearing today on the nominees to these very important posts around the world. I want to briefly take a moment to introduce John Roccolta, who's nominated to be the ambassador to the United Arab Emirates. As you've already outlined, he's a successful business executive and also a leader in the civic community. Since 1993, as you've already said, he's the chief executive officer of a construction firm that's been very successful. The United States and the UAE have a strong bilateral relationship on a range of issues that are topical even at this very moment, and the 2 countries have worked together on the past on key security and economic issues. But there's a lot of work to be done. We must fill this position as quickly as possible, and I have no doubt that Mr. Roccolta will serve his country with great distinction and will represent the United States honorably and effectively in Abu Dhabi, hopefully once he's confirmed. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rubio. Ambassador Norland, Ambassador Cohen, Mr. Roccolta, thank you for your past service to our country and for your willingness to be here today and to accept these assignments. I want to express my gratitude for your willingness to serve the United States of America. Each of you will be serving in nations that fit with the jurisdiction of the Middle East Subcommittee, but the issues that you face within each of your countries will vary greatly. Your work will be critical in maintaining and strengthening our alliances with key partners in the region. Ambassador Norland, in Libya, you will face a fractured state with warring parties set on gaining control over the territory. I look forward to hearing your views on how to best address the current situation in Libya, particularly your thoughts on pursuing a ceasefire and supporting a UN process. Ambassador Cohen, while I concur with the administration that we should strive to strengthen our military and trade relationships with Egypt, ongoing human rights abuses are simply unacceptable there. Egypt's government still jails thousands of its political dissidents, including Americans. It must be a high priority to secure the release of these individuals. I look forward to hearing how you will influence the Egyptian government on the issue of egregious human rights abuses. Let me preface my introduction of Mr. Roccolta by saying that he has been a long-term friend of my family. John has had a long and successful career in the private sector, as I've indicated earlier. I appreciate his achievements in that capacity. I'm grateful for his friendship. He's also someone who's given back to his community, leading economic development and revitalization efforts in Detroit. I'm confident that our country will be well served by his experience and leadership. Mr. Ricolta, as you know, the United Arab Emirates is a critical partner for the United States in the Middle East. The UAE has 3 U.S. bases, including a significant naval base, and is a key partner for counterterrorism efforts. In addition to security, the UAE is a significant trading partner with the U.S., including with my home state of Utah. I look forward to hearing how you will work to maintain a strong national security and trade relationship with our partner in the Middle East. As you acclimate in your roles, I hope that you will each remain open and candid with the Senate and our committees to any changes on the ground you witness or ways that we can support you in maintaining and strengthening our relationships with your areas of jurisdiction in the Middle East. Again, I appreciate you all being here today and look forward to hearing from you. With that, I'd like to recognize the distinguished ranking member for his comments, Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Senator Romney. Thank you to the nominees and to your families for being willing to serve in the case of our 2 career public servants, not for the first time. And thank you, Mr. Ricolta, for being willing to step up for your country. Let me just add on briefly to Senator Romney's remarks. Mr. Norland, if you're confirmed, you are going to confront a country that is essentially tipped into civil war 8 years after the February 17th revolution that deposed Gaddafi. Libya has yet to find peace or stability, much less attain its aspirations for democracy and prosperity. Most recently, the renegade commander of the so-called Libyan National Army, Khalifa Haftar, has tried and failed to take Tripoli by force, and at great cost, more than 650 killed and 3,500 wounded just since April 5th. And in the wake of President Trump's outreach to Haftar, there is more uncertainty now than ever as to where the United States stands as this chaotic civil war spirals out of control. Next door in Egypt, as Senator Romney mentioned, we are increasingly seeing authoritarianism and relentless repression in the Arab world's most populous nation. Through a widely discredited referendum this April, President Sisi succeeded in amending the Constitution to allow for an exception to term limits so that he can stay in office until at least 2030. He has crushed his political opposition, tightened repressive policies targeting the LGBT community, rounded up writers, journalists, artists, and activists for peaceful criticism. Yet President Trump has praised Sisi for doing an outstanding job, and Egypt remains the 2nd largest recipient of U.S. aid in the world. With that much money at stake, and again, with this much confusion about where the United States stands with respect to this campaign of repression, we need strong leadership in our embassy. And lastly, United Arab Emirates is one of our most important partners in the region in terms of counterterrorism, political and military cooperation, and trade and investment. But that relationship is also amongst our most challenging. The UAE leadership has asserted an increasingly risky militaristic foreign policy. And many of us have a list of growing concerns with the UAE's conduct in Yemen, its aggressive isolation of Qatar, its role in Sudan, and inhumane and unfair detention practices and trials at home. It is not insignificant that this will be the first political appointee to represent us in the UAE, a post that has traditionally been reserved for career diplomats, I would argue for good reason, but I look forward to hearing from the nominee. Thank you for agreeing to accept these very challenging assignments, and I look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. We'll now turn to our first nominee, Ambassador Norland. Again, we express appreciation to all of you for your willingness to take on these critical roles. Your full statements will be included in the record without objection. So if you could please keep your remarks to no more than 5 minutes, we would appreciate it so that the members of the committee can engage you with questions. Ambassador Norland, you may begin.
Chairman Romney, Ranking Member Murphy, Senators, this hearing will be the subject of immediate attention by the people of Libya as they look for signs of hope that the persistent violence in Tripoli will come to an end and a more secure and prosperous future for all Libyans will be achieved. The interests of the American people are also at stake with respect to ending innocent suffering, countering terrorism, stabilizing oil markets, stemming the human misery and political destabilization of large-scale migration, and forging closer economic cooperation. I'm honored by the confidence shown in me by the President and the Secretary of State in nominating me to serve as the next U.S. Ambassador to Libya. If confirmed, I pledge to you that I will do my utmost to bring U.S. diplomacy to bear on stabilizing the situation and promoting these U.S. interests. The principal task at hand is bringing the latest round of fighting, which started in early April, to an end through an immediate ceasefire in Tripoli. Lasting peace and stability in Libya can only come through a political solution, and halting the current violence is a critical step to create the conditions for a return to political negotiations. De-escalating the conflict requires engagement with a broad range of Libyan stakeholders, including not only Tripoli and Benghazi, but also key constituencies like Misrata, Zawiya, and Zintan. Equally critical is frank U.S. engagement with outside parties that have influence in Libya, some with a presence on the ground, in an effort to ensure that foreign involvement serves to reduce rather than promote violence. I'm committed to working with a wide array of Libyan and international partners, and in support of United Nations Special Representative to the Secretary General, Hassan Salameh, to reestablish an effective UN mediation process. This effort should build on the constructive talks between Prime Minister al-Sarraj and General Haftar that took place in Abu Dhabi in February. I'd like to stress, the United States does not see Libya as the plaything of foreign interests. Libya emerged from colonial rule in 1951, and a strong sense of independence and self-sufficiency still fuels the people of this young and fragile country. We respect this. The United States' approach to Libya is pragmatic and rooted in the clear vision of a unified Libyan state that can stand on its own as a force for stability and deliver prosperity to all Libyans, from Ajabia to Zawara and al-Bari to Tobruk. I have no illusion that this task will be easy, but if confirmed, I will lead my team to build upon the work done by my immediate predecessor, Ambassador Peter Bodie, and the hardworking staff of the Libya External Office, temporarily based at the U.S. Embassy Tunis and capably led by Interim Chargé d'Affaires Natalie Baker. I am very conscious that if confirmed, I would be carrying forward the work of Ambassador Chris Stevens, who gave his life trying to bring peace to the people of Libya. I will do my best to ensure that Chris Stevens, Glenn Doherty, Sean Smith, and Tyrone Woods did not die in vain. I'd like to thank my wife, Mary Hartnett, for her unfailing support throughout my career, and our children, Daniel and Kate, for their service to our nation growing up as Foreign Service kids. They and their spouses, Jen and Phil, and our 4 grandchildren, Ellie, Cam, Mary, and Owen, bring great joy to our lives. Mary and Daniel are here today. Daniel came from San Diego. Kate is actually living in the Middle East working on refugee issues. Chairman, Ranking Member, Senators, in closing, it's perhaps fitting to note that I was born in North Africa, in Rabat, my father's first Foreign Service post. His last posting as ambassador to Chad was cut short when rebels based in Libya advanced on Chad's capital, toppled the government, and forced our diplomats to flee on French military transports after being pinned down for 3 days. So in my lifetime, I have seen North Africa begin its remarkable transformation. I have also seen it experience the vagaries of self-serving political leadership and the predatory behavior of external forces, including those employing terrorism in their distorted view of Islam. I have seen how instability in Libya can spill over into neighboring countries. In my own Foreign Service career, I have had the opportunity to serve in majority Muslim countries, to work on conflict resolution, and to address the challenges of great power competition. Taken together, I hope that if confirmed, serving as ambassador to Libya will enable me to bring a lifetime of experience to bear in a way that will advance our interests and promote lasting peace and friendship for the United States and Libya. Thank you. I stand ready to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Ambassador Norland. Ambassador Cohen.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, members of the committee, it's an honor to appear before you today as the President's nominee to be Ambassador to Egypt. I'm grateful to President Trump and Secretary Pompeo for their continuing confidence in me, and if confirmed, I look forward to working closely with you and your colleagues to advance U.S. interests in Egypt and the region. Serving our nation as a Foreign Service officer for the past 33 years has been and continues to be a great privilege. I want to thank my amazing family, who unfortunately could not be here today, for their love and support over the years, And I also want to thank my Foreign Service mentors, ambassadors, deputy chiefs of mission, and assistant secretaries with whom I've served. In particular, I'd like to thank Ambassador Ryan Crocker, who encouraged me to join the Foreign Service in the mid-1980s, and with whom I had the honor of serving in Baghdad in 2003. My friend Stuart Jones, who was ambassador to Iraq when I was his deputy chief of mission from 2014 to 2016, set an example that I hope to emulate if confirmed. And Ambassador Jim Jeffrey, a national treasure who's been a steady source of wisdom, strategic thinking, friendship, and support since we first met over 25 years ago. As I had the honor of telling the committee the last time I appeared before you, I grew up in a California family that paid little attention to foreign affairs, and I began my journey to the Foreign Service in high school through involvement in Model United Nations and as an AFS exchange student. My journey continued in college studying international relations and Near Eastern affairs. Serving for the past 6 months as the acting U.S. representative to the United Nations has been a remarkable experience that exceeded what I dreamed possible in my Model UN days. However, I joined the Foreign Service with the intention of serving our nation in the Middle East, and I'm particularly honored to have been nominated to be the next U.S. ambassador to Egypt. America's strategic relationship with Egypt is crucial to our national security interests. The U.S. is affected by Egypt's geostrategic influence on regional political, economic, and military affairs, its governance of the Suez Canal, and its demographic weight as the most populous Arab country. It hosts the headquarters of the Arab League, and in February became the chair of the African Union for the year. Egypt continues to meet its obligations under the 1979 Egypt-Israel Treaty of Peace, which is the model for regional cooperation and stability. If confirmed, my primary concern will be to continue to shape our strategic relationship with Egypt in order to advance U.S. interests. Egypt is a key partner in countering potential threats to the United States and our allies. The Sinai Peninsula is the home to one of the most capable ISIS affiliates, and the Egyptian military campaign against ISIS Sinai province continues. In combating terrorism and promoting regional stability, President al-Sisi frequently acknowledges the importance of the U.S. role. If confirmed, I'll seek to ensure our counterterrorism partnership with Egypt continues to reduce threats to the United States' interests. Egypt is the second largest recipient of U.S. security assistance and one of the top 10 of U.S. economic assistance. The Departments of State and Defense ensure that U.S. security assistance is well targeted to achieve bilateral security objectives, including encouraging Egypt to use its defense budget to purchase more U.S.-produced military equipment, supplies, and services. As Secretary Pompeo said during his testimony to Congress in April, we've told Egypt that CAATSA requires sanctions on any person who knowingly engages in a significant transaction with Russia's defense or intelligence sectors. If confirmed, I will carry that message forward. The United States should have greater insight into the Sinai Peninsula to verify that U.S.-provided weapons are being used appropriately. If confirmed, I'll request additional travel for U.S. officials into the Sinai as security conditions permit. I'll also urge Egypt to grant journalists more access to the Sinai. I know this committee shares our deep concern about Egypt's restrictions on the freedoms of expression, association, peaceful assembly, and the press, about protecting the rights of vulnerable populations, particularly religious minorities and women, about restrictions on civil society, including the NGO law, and about allegations of abuses by Egyptian security forces. I know that you're concerned about the reasons for and the conditions of imprisonment of U.S. citizens in Egypt. Let me assure you that I strongly share all these concerns. If confirmed, I'll emphasize the vital role that protection for the fundamental freedoms and rule of law play in the progress of democracies and in building prosperous economies. I'll echo the call of Secretary Pompeo from Cairo for President al-Sisi to unleash the creative energy of Egypt's people, unfetter the economy, and promote a free and open exchange of ideas. For that same reason, I'll also commend President al-Sisi for his support of religious tolerance and of the participation of women in politics. Embassy Cairo is one of our largest embassies, and it offers consular services to more than 68,000 U.S. citizens in Egypt. The embassy staff, both American and Egyptian, is committed to furthering U.S. priorities and strengthening our partnership with Egypt in sometimes difficult conditions. If confirmed, I look forward to joining their efforts. My highest priority will always be the safety and security of all U.S. citizens in Egypt. I thank you again for the opportunity to testify before you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ambassador Cohen. Mr. Ricolta.
Chairman Romney, Ranking Member Murphy, members of the committee. I would like to thank President Trump and Secretary Pompeo for trust and confidence that they have shown in me, and I am humbled by this extraordinary opportunity to serve my country. It will represent the interests and values of the United States and strengthen our nation's bonds with the government and the people of the United Arab Emirates. This relationship is critical to our national security interest and is moderating and stabilizing force in one of the world's most volatile regions. I would like to thank my family, without whom I would never have been in a position to be considered for this job, particularly without the love, support, and inspiration of my family, especially my wonderful wife, Terry, for 43 years. She is here today with 3 of my 4 children, Eileen, Lauren, and Paige. I also have 3 of 11 grandchildren and many friends and extended family who are in the room today. And I could not be prouder of all of them for supporting me. My grandparents came from America to Romania seeking freedom and a chance for a better life. Our nation's values of hard work and gratitude, combined with love of our country, were instilled in my father. These served him well during his World War II when he was held prisoner of war in Germany after his B-26 bomber was shot down. He ultimately moved back to Detroit, acquired a construction company by the name of Walbridge, and I'm privileged to lead that company today. Having grown this regional firm into a multinational enterprise of over 2,000 employees, this experience has allowed me to understand the complexities of international business and commerce. These large and complex projects have given me experiences and insights which will be extremely helpful to U.S. business interests. If confirmed, promoting and developing U.S. business interests in the UAE will be one of my top priorities. If confirmed, I will lead the embassy in continuation of efforts to promote and maintain fair and reciprocal trade with the UAE. The World Expo 2020 in Dubai offers great potential to showcase the American story, ingenuity, and technology in the Middle East. I look forward to advancing American values to millions of visitors, many of them youth that visit our national pavilion. If confirmed, my highest priority will be ensuring the safety and security of Americans in the United Arab Emirates, including all private citizens who live and work in the UAE, as well as employees under the Chief of Missions Authority. I also believe that continuing our dialogue with the UAE on human rights and religious freedom represents another priority which I will work continuously to advance if confirmed. I understand that the UAE has been a key security partner for the United States and has joined us in several U.S.-led coalition operations, including against ISIS and al-Qaeda. I would work closely with the embassy team, as well as with the members of this committee, to ensure that our security partnership remains strong. If confirmed, I will fully support the UN-led peace efforts by UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths. The war in Yemen has taken on larger regional implications with the involvement of Iran and has created immense suffering among the Yemeni people. The administration's position on bringing an end to the conflict has been clear. Only a negotiated settlement can end this protracted war and unify Yemen. If confirmed, I will work to continue support for UN-led efforts to achieve a lasting end of hostilities and a comprehensive peace agreement in Yemen. I will also support efforts to address the dire humanitarian consequences of the conflict. I understand that 80% of Yemenis are in some need of humanitarian assistance. The international community must remain coordinated and strong in our response and in our efforts. All parties, especially the Houthi authorities, have to commit to lifting unnecessary impediments that slow down delivery of aid. The President has been clear. Iran is responsible for the May 12th and the June 13th attacks on 6 vessels off the coast of UAE and in the Gulf of Oman. The Iranian regime poses a major threat to freedom of navigation and maritime security from the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea. If confirmed, I will work and support the administration's efforts to keep the Straits of Hormuz open where 20% of the global petroleum passes. If confirmed, I will work tirelessly with the President Trump, my State Department colleagues, and this committee to protect and advance the interests of the American people. I will passionately and diligently represent our servicemen and women, business community, tourists, academics, the 50,000 American citizens living in the UAE, and others wishing to engage with the people of the United Arab Emirates. Chairman Romney, Ranking Member Murphy, and members of this committee, thank you for the privilege and opportunity to appear before you today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ricolta. The ranking member and I are going to both yield our time for purposes of voting and letting Senator Kaine offer the first questions.
Thank you, and I will do that as long as you tell the floor to keep the vote open until I get there.
I will.
Thank you, and congratulations to all of you. These are very, very important nominations, and it's hard to ask all the questions that I want to in 5 minutes before going to vote. I think I'm going to focus on Egypt, if I might start with you, Ambassador Cohen. It's good to see you again. The death of former President Morsi in a courtroom this week has got a lot of attention. There has been significant attention before his death to inadequate treatment of prisoners in Egyptian prisons. This is likely to be a significant issue of significance. The UN has called for an investigation into the circumstances of his death. Do you believe there should be such an investigation?
Senator, thank you for raising the issue. It is, of course, prison conditions in Egypt are a broader issue of concern.
Right.
We have American citizens who are incarcerated there, and a top priority has to be insisting that the conditions of their incarceration are decent, humane, meet adequate international standards, and that they're treated fairly under the law. In the case of President Morsi, I've seen the comments calling for an investigation, and I believe that if there are allegations of abuse, anytime investigations should be pursued.
The danger of not having an investigation that would have some credibility would be that this could easily lead to additional political turmoil, violence. A predictable response of folks in the Muslim Brotherhood side would be to try to ratchet up protests, even violent protests against the government. So the idea of an investigation, it's always important to get accountability, but also a credible investigation can be something that can help maintain some order. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you about the imprisonment of journalists in Egypt. I was in Egypt and had a very candid dialogue about this with President al-Sisi when he was running for president, before he was president. And I basically expressed to him, look, you've got internal challenges with dealing with terrorism and things like that, and the U.S. will probably give you a great deal of deference in trying to make decisions about how you police internal security, but just friend to friend, we have a very difficult time because of our culture understanding journalists being thrown in jail for long periods of time. And these are not just journalists for Egyptian publications. Journalists have been in jail for international publications, wire services like Reuters and otherwise. I have been disappointed. We had a pretty candid exchange about it, but I've been very disappointed with the Egyptian government's record of continuing to imprison journalists. Since this is such a key value of the United States, the First Amendment, as ambassador, what would you do? You can't dictate internal politics in that country, but what would you do to uphold the important values of freedom of the press and encourage the Egyptian government to up their game in that regard?
Senator, in public and private, I would make clear that the United States believes, and I personally believe, that having a strong democracy, having a prosperous country, having a stable country requires creating space for public opinion to express itself, including when that opinion is dissenting, without fear of retribution. And the case of journalism is at the center of that discussion. And if confirmed, I would be very happy to continue a conversation with this committee about how we can work together to advance that agenda with the Egyptians. But I would intend to raise it at the most senior levels on a regular basis.
Thank you. Mr. Ricolta, I want to ask a question about your opening testimony regarding flow of oil through the Straits of Hormuz. Do you know what percentage of American energy comes through the Straits? American energy? American. What percentage of American energy comes through the Straits?
I'm not familiar with exactly the number, but I believe it's low. It's not crucial to our country. We're pretty much self-producing right now.
That's correct. 40 years ago, it would have been 70 or 80%. It would, nearly existential if there was anything challenging in the Straits of Hormuz to the United States economy. And now it's relatively low because of the good fortune of American innovation in producing domestic energy. That said, there's an important global economic effect of problems in the Straits of Hormuz, obviously. But do you think it is the U.S.'s primary responsibility to be the guarantor of safe passage through the Straits, or is that more appropriately an international responsibility the United States should play a part in, because it's more other countries' energy resources that are at stake in this issue?
I believe both, that the United States plays a very significant role due to the maligned activities of Iran today, and we have a special relationship with our allies, both UAE and others. But also there is an international responsibility given the fact that they consume most of the oil that comes through the States.
I think that's an important point. I just want to make sure that we don't take upon the world's burden of being the guarantor when the Straits of Hormuz are no longer of the same existential importance that they were to the United States a few decades ago. We do have a role. That's an important thing, but we need to call upon other countries to shoulder significant portions of the burden. Thank you for the testimony, and Mr. Chair, I'm going to yield it back to the lonely Senator Rubio as I leave and go vote.
Yeah, I hope you'll tell them that I need to vote as well, because, and at some point here, if the folks don't get back in time, we may have to briefly recess till they get here, because we have an important vote. I want just to focus on Libya. I don't think most Americans are aware of what a catastrophe this has turned into and how bizarre it is in some ways. Mr. Norland, and I'm sure in your current role as an advisor of the Joint Chiefs, you've watched closely a lot of the events there unfold. Briefly, we have the stalemate between the LNA and the GNA, the LNA controlling the vast majority of the territory, but the GNA posing a greater threat to their hold on that. And largely, it's unlike many of the other conflicts in parts nearby, it's not about sectarianism. It's just a raw power calculation. And then you've got all these proxies, and it's kind of a weird standoff. On the LNA side, you have the UAE involved. You have the Russians, who have about $4 billion of oil contracts and are trying to get more. You have the French. And then you have Egyptian help, primarily because they're concerned about their border and instability and so forth, triggering over to them. And then on the other side, on the GNA side, you have the Turks, who want to position themselves at least as a regional and play big boy as a global power. And then you have the Italians, who are apparently involved to thwart the French and vice versa. So I don't fully understand that one. But our national interest concern there involves what appears to be a growing effort, still a nascent, but nonetheless one we have to be very cognizant of, that both al-Qaeda and ISIS are taking advantage of this sort of stalemate and fighting to look for an opportunity to reconstitute an area of operation that was eliminated. And they're doing two things. Number one, they're using the conflict as a way to do it, but they're also, I believe, taking advantage of the fact that because the LNA is now facing off with the GNA, the counterterrorism pressure against them is, at this point, virtually non-existent. So if you could share with us some of your insights or views about what we can do from the post to sort of keep an eye on all this.
Well, Senator, I think you've characterized the situation extremely accurately. The fact is that the fighting that's underway now cannot possibly produce a successful outcome for any side in this situation. Any victory would be Pyrrhic, and the United States is absolutely committed to working with all of the parties, both inside Libya and with, as you say, a number of the interested outside countries, some of whom have a presence on the ground, to move with UN support and leadership in the direction of a negotiated settlement. The United States does have influence in this situation, both through the vision that we have, the neutral vision. We don't take sides in this equation, but also through economic sanctions and other measures we're able to apply. And if confirmed, it would be my role to do everything, to bring everything to bear that we can, diplomatically and otherwise, to try to end what, as you say, is a needless and terrible conflict.
Thank you, and I apologize. We're going to have to recess briefly, and upon call the chair, and so the committee will stand in brief recess until the chair returns.
Short recess is over. Ambassador Norland, given the fighting within Libya and the disarray that exists in that country, what do you believe should be our highest or our higher priorities as you look to that, to leading our post there?
Senator, I think the highest priority right now is to achieve a ceasefire and to get the parties, the key parties on the ground that are currently in conflict to move to the negotiating table and search for a political solution to the situation in Libya. The United Nations has been playing a very effective role under Hassan Salameh to try to get a process going. There was an initial meeting in Abu Dhabi some months ago that had prospects for success but has not panned out. And I think if confirmed, my goal would be to apply all the diplomatic interest and leverage that we can, both with parties inside Libya, in the east and in the west, as well as some of the local parties, and then with outside countries in the region to influence the situation in the direction of a political settlement.
Thank you. Ambassador Cohen, Egypt has obviously been a long-term partner of ours and plays a critical role in the region. But Egypt has recently flirted with the possibility of buying fighter jets, as you know, from Russia. Secretary Pompeo notes that if that sale were to happen, the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act would require sanctions on the Egyptians. I and 16 of my colleagues have called on President Sisi to reconsider the sale. How do you believe we, and how would you approach Egypt on this issue?
Senator, I think the conversation begins right where you started with CATSA and the consequences of going forward with it. But it very quickly goes into promoting American goods. I think we have better stuff. We have better product. And we are, right now, Egypt's partner of choice across the board, and we need to make sure that we remain a partner of choice. So my engagement would be to underscore for the Egyptians that the fact that about half of their military inventory is American is for a good reason, because they chose the best they could get. And I think it's important that we continue to encourage them to buy our goods.
I would presume as well that our continued financial commitment to Egypt, particularly to their military effort, would obviously be influenced by a decision on their part to buy equipment from a geopolitically hostile power.
You know, the Egyptians have a long-standing and broad relationship with Russia on the commercial side, including military commerce. But the U.S. relationship with them, I believe, is stronger. And we will continue to strengthen that and grow our side of the account and work with them and press them and encourage them to reduce the Russian side.
Do you have any prospect about how we could encourage them to reconsider their human rights policies, particularly with regards to imprisoning dissidents?
Well, as I alluded to in my prepared statement, my belief is that we need to underscore for them over and over again at a high level, publicly and privately, that progress, prosperity, and stability requires them to create space for a variety of views, including dissenting views, without fear of retribution. And that will continue to be my theme as I discuss this with the Egyptians.
Thank you. Mr. Recolta, what are your perspectives on the priorities for the U.S. with regards to our security relationship with the UAE, and how might you hope to advance those priorities?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Our priorities with the UAE continue to revolve around our own national security and the security of the UAE itself. They are being threatened existentially by Iran, and the closer and the deeper that our relationship can be would be advantageous both to us and to them. Secondly, we have a significant trade relationship with the UAE. Today, they are we enjoy the second largest trade surplus at over $15 billion. And as I said in my opening remarks, if confirmed, I have every intention to see us continue that advantage. And thirdly, the UAE is a moderating force in terms of human rights and religious freedom in the Gulf and in the broader Mideast. And I would continue to encourage them at the highest level to continue to make modifications and reforms to join the Western world in terms of the democracies and freedoms that we have as U.S. citizens.
Thank you. Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Norland, thank you for your commitment to the country and taking on this very difficult job. You're going to face a very fluid situation when you arrive in Libya. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, in April, President Trump called Khalifa Haftar as he was leading his failed offensive on Tripoli, and a public readout of the call made no reference to that offensive, and instead the president seemed to praise Haftar for his ongoing counterterrorism efforts, a message that deeply perplexed our international partners since he has been actively attacking groups we worked with to dislodge ISIS. Can you clarify for this committee the U.S. position on Khalifa Haftar?
Yeah, Senator, thank you. And as you can imagine, as part of my consultations, I've been exploring that theme, and it's clear to me that we consider the Libyan National Army to be a key player in any effort to produce a political solution to the situation in Libya. And it was, I think, as I understand it in that respect, that there was a conversation between the President and Haftar. I understand that discussion revolved around counterterrorism, oil market stability, and the role of the LNA precisely in a political solution. What I've found in the course of my consultations is unanimous consent across the U.S. government. There has to be a ceasefire. There has to be a movement towards a political settlement, that the United Nations' role in this process is key, and if confirmed, that's the path that I'll be embarked on.
I'm glad you're willing to take on this job. You, I think, can understand how a phone call in the middle of an offensive that doesn't mention the ceasefire or the offensive would be interpreted by the international community and our partners as an endorsement of that offensive, not a move towards a ceasefire. But that is not your phone call, that is the President's, and I appreciate your willingness to take up this job. Mr. Cohen, you talked about the importance of our security relationship with Egypt. Let me just ask you a general question. Do you believe that it's appropriate to use U.S. aid and the threat of cutoff of U.S. aid as a means to try to push a human rights agenda in Egypt? The situation is getting worse, not better. And I think a fundamental question is: Are we willing to deliver a message to Sisi that there is a line he can cross, at which point we are no longer comfortable or bound to be a partner with them if they continue to ratchet up this campaign against political dissidents?
Thank you, Senator. Let me take this in two parts. And the first is that I believe in, and if confirmed, I will, of course, be supporting the law, and the law that the Congress passes that provides the financing has human rights provisions in it. And consequently, we currently have a significant amount of money that has not been released because those conditions have not been either met or waived by the administration. So I think the path we've taken is completely appropriate. I also believe that the counterterrorism assistance that we provide is in our own national security interests. So we need to be sure as we go forward that we're protecting and defending American national security interests, which are served by ensuring that the Egyptians can prosecute counterterrorism against ISIS in Sinai, address terrorism in their western desert, address terrorism in Egypt's heartland. It's not just Egypt's interests that are at stake there, it's America's.
Let me just sneak in a couple questions for Mr. Ricolta. You disclosed as part of your process before the committee having some business interests in the UAE that may require you under UAE law to keep some of those companies open. Can you just talk about the projects that you have participated in, your company has participated in UAE, and the steps that you've taken in coordination with this nomination?
Yes, thank you for the question, Senator. Yes, thank you for the question, Senator. From 2003 to 2013, my company did significant amount of business in the UAE. We stopped bidding in 2011. We finished the final project in 2013. All of our staff and everything was removed from the UAE and sent elsewhere in the world. Secondly, there are contractual obligations and guarantee, both contractually and by law, that require us to give a corporate guarantee on those projects. If you will, the fact that if something were to go wrong, they could come back at us. That is the only thing, and we could have closed down our LLC that was working there, but as a practice for tax purposes, we leave those open until the final guarantees are completed.
Have you had other business in the Middle East over that period of time?
We did work in Doha on one project, but the projects were primarily in the UAE and in Doha, and the Doha project was obviously back then conducted out of the Dubai office. But everything has been shut down, and we have absolutely no intentions of going back. In fact, I'll make it a little stronger. We will not be going back to doing business there.
In the region, in the Middle
region,
East?
yes.
And will you make that commitment once you leave this post as well?
Yes, I would, personally.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. Mr. Recolta, in just a moment, Senator Menendez, who is the regular ranking member, will be joining us and wants to ask questions of the three. But anticipating his arrival, let me first ask you, it is a departure from some precedent to have an individual service ambassador to UAE other than a career foreign service representative. What are your thoughts about that assignment? Does it represent a disadvantage not having that foreign service background to be able to serve in this regard, or do you believe that your experience will prepare you appropriately to serve in this critical spot?
I think the difference between a career ambassador and a political appointed ambassador are quite different. I think each brings different qualifications to the job. I certainly will be at somewhat of a disadvantage on the career side of all of the experiences that they have. But on the other hand, I bring other experiences that I think will be very, very beneficial. On the side of perhaps being a bit at a disadvantage, I would submit to you that I will be using the embassy staff in the State Department to probably a greater degree, relying on them, at least in the initial phases, for a lot of advice and guidance, and that's pretty much my answer.
Great, thank you. Ambassador Norland, I appreciate that in your opening statement you made reference to the loss of life associated with those who've served in Libya, and want to underscore the debt that we owe to them and their families, and appreciate your recognition of those individuals. Now having seen what happened there and recognizing your assignments in other ambassadorial posts around the world, how confident are you in the effectiveness and the sufficiency of our security resources in protecting the lives of our men and women who serve in the Foreign Service in Libya and in this part of the world?
Well, thanks for your concern, Senator, and your interest. In fact, because of the security situation in Libya in the recent few years, our diplomatic activities regarding Libya have been conducted out of our embassy in Tunis for security reasons. Our chief of mission has periodically gone into Libya in cooperation with military forces from AFRICOM on short day trips to try to conduct some diplomatic activity on the ground. But that's a heavy security load to conduct missions like that. And at the moment, I think we're grappling with the question of how do we maintain an effective diplomatic presence with a finger on the pulse of what's going on in Libya, but in a way that protects our people. And if confirmed, that's the balance I would need to strike, putting primary emphasis, of course, on the security of our people, but also trying to find a way to maximize the effectiveness of our diplomatic presence.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm going to yield the rest of my time to Ranking Member Menendez, who's just joined us. He'll ask questions of the, if you're ready for that, of the panel. And Senator Menendez, when you finished asking your questions, you can complete the panel. Rest of us have all had our questions, and we've had our opening statements. Well, I'm going to have to run and go vote, but for benefit of those that might care, I will come back to express my appreciation to each of you. If you're still here, it won't take me that long to vote. Thank you.